Welcome back to the Fourth Way Podcast. This episode is one that I was not originally planning on as an episode for a number of reasons. First of all, this is something that I have prepared for my grandmother's funeral. She is my last surviving grandparent, somebody that I was very close to as I was growing up. I stayed over at her house all the time, and she took me groundhog hunting and even deer hunting once. When she was, she was old when I was, even when I was a kid, a teenager. So she was really feisty, really spunky. A great follower of Jesus, just an awesome person. And so she just not suddenly, I guess. I mean, she was 94 and not in great health, but she ended up passing away. It all kind of came about pretty quickly, as it can when people are older. So I wasn't planning on this episode for that reason, first of all, because it kind of came all of a sudden, but also because sharing about somebody that that I knew and loved isn't really like what interest do other people have in that. But as I started to write what I wanted to say at her funeral, it just there's not really that much that's about her specifically, so much as it is about humanity and meaning and purpose and all that stuff in general. It's just as using her as kind of the object lesson for this. So I don't really know how to explain it. You'll just have to listen to the episode. And if you don't want to listen to it, that's fine. It might be a little bit weird to listen to somebody else talk about somebody else's funeral that you don't know. But the reason I ultimately decided to share it was because I didn't think there was too much specificity. I thought it could generally apply. And in particular, it fits really well into this portion of the season. It fits well for two reasons. One is that the topic is really about just the faithfulness, simple faithfulness, and that fits perfectly at this part of the season. And secondly, because it's in regard to like consequentialism and things, it's extremely applicable. Something that I have thought about a number of times in my life is this idea that if you think about the vast majority of people in the world throughout the vast majority of history, like if you just throw everybody into a pool, not like a swimming pool, but like a pool that you can draw from, and you just randomly pick somebody out, the chances of you picking somebody out that are like somebody who's prestigious or like super important or super rich, like that's going to be extremely rare. Chances are you're going to pick out like some yeoman, some peasant farmer, right? You're going to pick out somebody who had a really hard life. You're going to pick out somebody who's poor. Like the vast majority of people throughout the vast majority of history are just people who've lived in one local place without moving around too much, and people who've been poor, people who've been extremely simple. And as you think about that, it should do one of two things to you. I mean, number one route that you can take is you can be encouraged by it. Like, oh man, that's cool. A lot of people, like, we're all in this together. Like, this is the human struggle. Or the second thing you could think is, man, how hopeless is that? The vast majority of people throughout all history have had pretty much zero impact on the course of history. Like, they've done nothing important. They've gone nowhere important. They've done nothing important. They've literally just existed off the land. They've scraped by, right? That's the vast majority of people throughout history. For me, I think that's one of the things that encourages me about faithfulness. The ethic, the metric of faithfulness, not the metric of what can you accomplish, of, the ends justifying the means, of we've got to accomplish these ends. It's like, no. If you have to accomplish ends for God, if that's what it means to be good, then 99.9% of people throughout all history are damned or condemned in some way because they suck, right? They didn't do anything. But if faithfulness is the measure, man, every single person could accomplish that. And it reminds me of there's a great quote by Kierkegaard. I mean, purity of heart is to will one thing. I've said it a million times, but man, you got to read that or go back and listen to. I went through each of the chapters as well, but like you've got to go through that. It's just absolutely fantastic and beautiful in this regard. But listen to what Kierkegaard says here. Quote, "In eternity, you as an individual will only be asked about your faith and about your faithfulness. There will be absolutely no asking about whether you were entrusted with much or little, whether you were given many talents of silver to work with, or whether you were given 100-pound weight to carry. But you will be asked only about your faith and about your faithfulness." End quote. Man, that's so true. And the widow's mite, the widow and her son's flour, the boy's basket of fish and bread. And it is God who gives the abundance, right? God is faithful, and what he asks us for is our faithfulness. That's why I want to share today's episode with you. It fits with the theme of, so much of what I've tried to highlight. And I hope that through my experience and through what I say here, that it will just reinforce the beauty of a simple, faithful life. And hopefully it's something that can be said at my funeral and something that could be said at your funeral. So here it is. My speech, whatever, for the funeral of my grandmother. Futility. That's how the author of Ecclesiastes describes our existence. All is futility. Death is the ever-present reminder of this terrible truth. It's a reminder we are all constantly trying to avoid. The conclusion that all our work and pleasures are fleeting and futile. But whether one lives to the age of 4 or 94, death declares that our endeavors will all end the same. Like a vapor, they will vanish. When I became a parent, part of me felt like I was winning in the battle against futility. I had a piece of me who would carry on long after I was gone. Someone who would remember me and tell my stories. But as I looked around, I realized that even this was futile. I saw Nancy Jane Kreider in her waning years, my last surviving grandparent, someone whose stories I continued to tell, and I realized that her life would fade with me and my cousins. After we who knew her were gone, she would be no more in time or in memory. So I gave to Nancy Jane the only seeming hope one can have against futility. I gave her a new name. We named our youngest daughter Gemma Jane, so that Grandma's legacy might be carried on, that her memory might not be completely forgotten, that her works might not have been in vain. Such is the power of a name, the power of immortality, the power to transcend time, even after our deaths. With this power of a name, rulers carve them into monuments, businessmen and women emblazon their names on company logos, and revolutionaries seek to join the valiant few proclaimed throughout the annals of history. Names are our only hope to immortalize our work, for our lives not to be forgotten, for our lives not to end in futility. Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote a beautiful poem about this very thing, about the most powerful in the world seeking to preserve the meaning of their lives. Listen to what Shelley writes in his great poem, Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal appear these words, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Ozymandias, the self-proclaimed King of Kings, extended his legacy by having those he enslaved carve his name into a block of stone. But thousands of years later, we see that this was futility. All the monument but the pedestal had turned to sand, for even empires and stones eventually dissolve into dust. Sometimes, when I look at my children, when I look at Gemma Jane, the futility of it all breaks through the veneer of meaning I've tried to carve into existence through this name. One day, in the not-too-distant future, hopefully long after I'm dead, Gemma's name will cease to be uttered as well, and with her, all traces of Nancy Jane and all her works will then be remembered and spoken of no more. Yet as we peruse the rest of the Bible, a parallel picture to the futility portrayed in Ecclesiastes begins to form. Jacob wrestled with God and was given a new name, Israel. We remember his name. Peter proclaimed Jesus as Lord, dying on a cross for him, and was given a new name, Cephas, and we remember his name. Jesus humbled himself unto poverty, suffering, and death, and we remember his name. The name of Jesus is carved into the hearts and souls of billions throughout history, a name that will never fade away. God knows the difficulty of faith, the difficulty in believing that the futility of our existence can be overcome by humble service and sacrifice, by faithfulness. Who could believe such a thing? Who could believe that humility gives us a better chance at meaning than power or prestige? God knows that such a thing is hard to believe, which is part of the reason he gave us the example of Jesus' life, a life seemingly more futile than any other, filled with difficulty and defeat, a life of suffering and want, ending in what appeared to be a pointless death. But this futile life ended up being a life vindicated by God in resurrection, resulting in the issuance of a new name, one who sits down at the right hand of God, King of Kings. While the author of Ecclesiastes was right about the futility of our lives, he fortunately did not have the final word on the matter. For those who choose to follow the true King of Kings, rather than set themselves up as kings, they will be given a new name as well, a name that endures, a name which cannot be weathered or faded by the forces of time or space, a name which will resound throughout all eternity. I know that when Nancy Jane stood before her Lord on November 21st, 2025, she was given a new name. I don't yet know that name in full, but I know it in part. Good, faithful, servant. While I know that Nancy Jane's name won't be remembered 10,000 years from now, not even 100 years from now, her new name will last forever. Unlike Ozymandias, the self-proclaimed King of Kings, her life will not have been in vain, because rather than set herself up as the King of Kings, she laid her life down for the true King of Kings, a king whose power comes not by might or by force, but through a humility, service, and love which compels us to him. If God can use the life of a meaningless, poor Palestinian crushed by empire to transform billions of lives, then there is hope for us as well. We know that our lives are futile, So our hope must be that they might somehow be redeemed from this futility. And this hope takes faith, but not an unfounded faith. It is a faith that is the product, the substance of our hope, founded on a real-world example. I know that Nancy Jane's hope produced her faith, and I know that her faith has now become sight. I also know that she shared the same hope for all of us here in this room, that we might recognize the great futility of our lives so that our hope might be even greater. I'm thankful to have had Nancy Jane as my grandmother, but even more, I'm thankful to have known her as good, faithful servant, a name which will never be forgotten.